guys, welcome to ETJ Writes. Today we are going to be talking about how to unstick your plot and smash writer's block, essentially creating a story from nothing. This is part one of a three-part series that is designed to help anyone who has never started a story before or has started but doesn't know how to continue because you've got stuck. Now, a lot of times we refer to that getting stuck as writer's block, but it doesn't have to be. There's always a way to get your story moving again and finish it getting to the end. Now, this series is focusing on your very first draft, what some people call a zero draft. So we're not trying to be perfect here. We are just trying to get done. So this first part of the series is going to tackle some very common problems, questions that arise, and how to solve them. There is a written version of this article that I will link to in the description down below. So if you would prefer to read it or you need something to refer back to and you don't want to skip back and forth through the video, check that out and use it as you're writing if you feel that you need a guide. Hopefully by the end of this series, you will have all the tools and knowledge that you need to be able to smash that writer's block and get your story moving again or started if it's something you've never done before. The first problem that may arise is that you have no idea where to start. You know you want to write. Maybe you wrote a little something in school and your teacher told you it was good, or you saw a television show and you thought, hey, there's a deeper story here behind two characters that haven't interacted a lot, but you think it would be cool if they did. Or you have a story inside of you, your memoir, or something that you saw that sparked an idea, and you know that you just have to put it out there on paper and make it work. Except you don't have any idea how to do that. How do we begin? The first thing you can do is you can pick a subject, you can pick a person, or you can pick a character. So how do we go about picking a character, a subject, a person? Well, we're outside in this beautiful nature setting and we're surrounded by leaves and plants. So I'm going to pick the idea of a leaf, okay? What kind of story can I tell about a leaf? Well, let me just draw from things that happen in nature. Leaves fall to the ground, don't they? And when a leaf falls to the ground, we can think about if that leaf had feelings, how would that leaf feel about the prospect of one day leaving his home and coming to the ground, all right? And it also might be good to try and pick a name. Now, you can just pick a name out of a hat. I'm going to pick Russell because Russell sounds like the name Russell, R-U-S-S-E-L-L, and it's the sound that the leaves make rustling in the wind. So it works both ways. Now, not all names you pick have to have some kind of special meaning. If you like something or if you just went onto a baby names registry and picked something, there you go, you're good. As I said, I'll pick Russell because I like both how it sounds and that it has a double meaning, and I think that's fun. We're talking about Russell being afraid of falling to the ground. Now you have a story that has emotions and feelings attached to it. So now we're going to say, what kind of things could befall Russell? Well, there could be an ant that wants to take a bite out of him. Or perhaps a ladybird makes its home under his shade. Or perhaps he watches a family of squirrels as they go from little baby squirrels and then eventually leave the nest and go on to live their little squirrel lives. So we could write about all these things that Russell is seeing and experiencing. And then as we get to fall, we can talk about his fears and how he is afraid that when he leaves his tree, he's going to a whole new existence, one that is scary for him. But maybe when he does fall, he touches the ground and maybe he becomes part of the leaf litter and provides a new home for the animals that are on the ground. Maybe a child picks him up and uses him as part of a leaf pile, and then he gets to enjoy being jumped on. Or perhaps this child, instead of using him in a leaf pile, takes him home, spray paints him, puts him on the wall in a wreath. And Russell has now gone from one type of life to another type of life. And he can see that there was no reason to be afraid after all. It's a very simple story, but it illustrates the point. I picked a character. I gave him some thoughts and feelings and emotions. I used the natural life cycle of trees and what might reasonably happen to a leaf in a given season to shape my story. And then I have a conclusion where Russell reflects on his experiences, where he started, where he ends up, and whether or not it is better or worse for him. So I challenge you to do that. If you have no idea where to start, pick anything you like. It can be a character, it can be a subject, it can be a theme, and just start putting ideas down on the page, perhaps based on things that are around you, perhaps based on other stories. The important thing is just getting started. But once you have that starting point, then we can go ahead and address some other issues that may arise. Sometimes you come up with an absolutely awesome idea, but you have no idea how to take that idea and turn it into a story. What you want to do is try and attach some characters or theme or some world building to your idea and take it from just that little kernel and explode it into something big. I'm a character-focused person, so I like to start with a character and then start asking some what-if questions. For example, take the Terminator. It asks, what if machines ruled the future? What if someone created a resistance to their machine overlords? And what if the machines, unhappy with the way that the status quo was changing, sent one of their own back in time to stop the resistance before it was even an idea? You can see how all these what-if questions led James Cameron to the creation of the Terminator, an absolutely iconic character we will never forget. If starting with world building, you'll want to ask a different set of what-if questions. Instead of asking what-if questions that lead to the creation of a character, you're asking what-if questions that lead to the creation of a world. So, for example, if we never ended up getting rid of steam technology, what would our world look like? Of course, that's the genre of steampunk. What if Norse people existed at the same time as dragons? Kind of some of the concept ideas behind Skyrim. And what if science could give people superpowers? Marvel Comics. So all those questions lead us to world building in a way that creates a place for our ideas to live. Then we can go back to that character building exercise, figure out who our characters are in this world, and you don't have to start with much. It could be a leaf. And then you throw some obstacles in their way and let them out into this world and see what happens. If you're starting with theme, you want to ask, what should my audience come away thinking about? What question needs to be on their minds after they finish the book? For example, in Romeo and Juliet, we are left thinking, what would happen if the families had resolved their differences and weren't feuding for so long? Or with Jurassic Park, what happens when you attempt to play God with science? Usually, this approach requires that you start at the end and then work backward to the beginning of your story. Along the way, you create characters who are either going to challenge or further the ideas presented in your theme. So those are 3 things you can do if you don't have any ideas and you want to start somewhere. You add a character, or you do some world building, or you have a theme, and you tie that together with the idea you came up with, and that'll give you a place to keep going from. Sometimes, though, you're great at creating characters. You've got past that initial blank state, and you have the most amazing character you could ever think of. But you don't know where to go with them. You don't have a plot, and everything you've been reading or learning about says that you need your characters to have a plot. Actually, this is less of a problem than you might think, because awesome characters can often hold together the most bare semblance of a plot, because the story is character-driven, so how the characters react to the situation around them is what creates the story, not some kind of overarching narrative that they are part of. For example, think about Scooby-Doo. The story is literally the same in every single episode. The kids hear about a monster, they start looking for clues, they get separated halfway in the middle, Shaggy and Scooby have some kind of chase scene and they eat in the middle of the chase scene, Velma loses her glasses, and then at the end, they unmask who it really was all along. Every single episode of Scooby-Doo is pretty much like this. But because the characters are so much fun, we'll watch the same thing over and over and enjoy it every single time. However, if you can get really, really good world building to go along with those characters and a really good theme and a really good what if question, you can take those characters and make the story that much more interesting, make it solid, make it something that people will remember. Now, before we fully dive into building a story from your character, it is worth considering what medium you want to tell your story in, because that affects how you are going to show this character to the world. Are you creating a video game? Are you creating a song cycle? Is this a epic ballad poetry like in the days of old? Is it a short story? Do you have an epic length novel? Or are you creating for film or theater? Each one of these different mediums is going to affect what journey your character takes. So if you're daunted by the process of writing a 100,000 word epic novel, don't do that. Write a 20K novella or a 5K short story. That way you can explore your characters without the burden of having to take them on these overarching journeys over and over and over again and get stuck because you just ran out of ideas. Make it short first, and then experiment from there as your experience grows. Once you know what your medium is, then it's time to formulate a plot. Now, again, your plot doesn't have to be very much at all. Again, with Scooby-Doo, we see it's the same thing over and over and over again. But if you've never done this before, here's a little handy guide on how to do that. You start your character in their ordinary life, and then you create a disruption event of some kind. This can be anything that takes the hero out of their normal life and out of their normal goals and puts them on a path to something else. Now, your hero can be either reactive or proactive. So something happens and then they react to it. Or nothing has happened and they cause something to happen. Then the chain of events spins off from there. This is helped along with the creation of some goals for your character. So for instance, if they live in a small town and their goal is just to meet somebody and then move to the big city and start a new life, you can throw things in the way that either help them achieve that goal or take them further away from it. So let's say a meteor strikes that town and now they're stuck in a war zone and they can't get out. Are they now focused on trying to survive, or are they focused on trying to escape so they can get to the city? That's an example of an external thing. On the other hand, maybe they really, really want to find love, but they're too anxious and shy, and whenever someone comes up to them, it makes them go away. What kind of disruption event is going to happen to make that person step out of their comfort zone and get beyond these internal obstacles to pursue their goal? That's the things you have to think about when you're putting your characters into the world building setting here and giving these disruption events to them. The more you try this as a thought exercise, the better you'll get at it, and pretty soon you'll be creating awesome characters and giving them really good goals for them to work towards, and then you have a story. Now sometimes you've got the world building pinned down, but what you don't have is characters or a theme or the idea of how to get a plot. And hopefully you can see how all of these are related. Once you start doing characters, it brings in the world building. Once you start creating a theme, it brings in the characters and the world building, and etc., etc. But everyone starts at a different spot. So, again, let's say we start with world building. What kind of things can you drill down into to find your characters? So, instead of just having a typical fantasy hero, let's make it more interesting by going out of our way to find underutilized professions. For example, if you are setting something in a steampunk world, are we going to pick the princess of that world, a general, someone who is high status and standing? Or maybe could we pick the plumber who is just trying to do their best to get by? And in the steampunk setting, we could consider what genre. Is it a sci-fi steampunk? Is it a thriller? Is it a murder mystery and the plumber goes to fix somebody's house and discovers bloodstains behind the toilet and they're the only person who knows about this and now they're being framed for murder and they have to clear their name somehow? See? Just came up with a story. So if you have really, really good world building, try and hone in on specific underutilized aspects of that world building to create something really interesting. For example, in Skyrim, there's this place called Blackreach, which is this amazing underground cavern that used to belong to the Dwemer, the dwarven elf race of Skyrim, that suddenly and mysteriously disappeared. But within this place, there's these things called crimson nirnroot. And you might think, well, what's so special about this plant? that is red and chimes? Well, turns out it belongs to this guy who was trying to figure out how to use crimson nirnroot for certain properties to create really, really great alchemical things. That's a little story in and of itself, and it's a quest that you can get interested in. The fetching the nirnroot themselves is kind of annoying, but the idea behind it, that's interesting. We're not talking about some great hero, which you of course are as the Dragonborn, but we're talking about a specific quest that one alchemist went on, and it left it up to you to finish. So even something as small as botany can create an interesting story if you're really thinking about every detail of your world building. You can also use world building to explore ideas of theme. So for instance, The Giver explores the idea of utopia, where everything is not as it seems on the surface. Or Fahrenheit 451, which explores what happens when we literally take the idea of burning books too far. How is this going to affect the world that somebody lives in? So taking your ideas and themes and combining them with world building can create something truly insightful. Well, hopefully that gives you an idea of where to start if you, number one, have no ideas absolutely whatsoever and you need somewhere to jump off from. Number two, if you have an idea but no idea how to take it beyond that, so we add characters, we add theme, we add world building. Number three, if you got the characters but you don't know how to add the world building or the theme or the plot. Number four, if you got the world building but you don't know how to add everything else. And then number five, if we are taking theme and putting that together with everything so far. And like I said, you can see how as you're building your characters, as you're doing your world building, as you are thinking about your theme, these things start to all come together. So it's not necessarily one process where you design your character from start to end and then add the story. As you're designing your character, you may be world building. As you're thinking about your theme, you may be creating your plot. So start brainstorming and thinking of all these things, and if you get stuck, like I said, I've got my article down in the description below. You can read it at your leisure and follow the instructions, and hopefully you'll be able to create something really, really epic. And if you have any questions about anything, feel free to either leave them on the article or drop them in the comment section down below. Part 2 is going to be looking at how we take those half-started ideas and develop them to finish them and get to the end of your story. I kind of alluded to a little bit of the process I will be talking about in part 2 here in part 1, but we will be doing a deep dive into that in part 2. So look out for that. It's going to be right here. Well, until next time, happy writing. ETJ out.